Intrepid will be the next Activision. Guaranteed. I don't think you understand, Jason. I'm done. Done. Done! You got what you wanted. Jason, after all of this, I actually don't even want anything. I'm really over it altogether. I have zero interest in continuing. It's crazy. I created this value in return for you that is 20 to 50 times back what you put in, and I am the greedy person? I bawled on the fawner yesterday while I'm going fucking blind, and my fucking mother, who I haven't been able to fucking visit in 7 years, is dying. Fuck you! Well, everyone, this is it. This is the conclusion to the story of Jason Caramanis, the first Ashes of Creation investor who released a deluge of information since February that's offered so much insight into what exactly was happening behind the scenes at Intrepid Studios that led to the implosion of the next big MMO, supposedly funded by billionaire gamer Steven Sharif. This video contains the remaining text messages from multiple group chats that actually overlaps with ongoing litigation in the Federal Court of California, along with the chat history between former Intrepid CEO Steven Sharif and Jason Caramanis that may be relevant to a different lawsuit that was recently served against Steven. If you haven't watched the first video that started so much of what we, the public, now have in our possession, from the interview of a private chef that supposedly didn't exist, all the way to the general ledger of Intrepid Studios that shows very suspect transactions, I highly recommend you do watch that first video, as you'll be missing a lot of context otherwise. Unlike the first video, however, after listening to all of your feedback, I've actually processed the text messages and uploaded them to a Google Doc so you can read all of the relevant text messages in chronological order yourselves. To the best of my ability, I've confirmed and corroborated the veracity of these text messages in similar fashion to what we've done for all the other text messages and documents we've published. It's important to also note that even Steven Sharif himself has not yet denied the legitimacy or veracity of the text messages, and he has not yet responded publicly either to even his own older brother testifying against him in court. I'll talk about a couple important personal updates at the end of this video as well, so without further ado, let's get into it. When we last left off with text messages in 2021, Robert Dawson, who invested over $70 million into Intrepid and Ashes of Creation, was being introduced by Jason to Steven. This meant that Jason was no longer the primary funder that Steven had to constantly ask money from, so Intrepid Studios would be able to fulfill its basic functions such as paying the employees. So based on that fact and timeline, in a lot of the more recent text messages from March 2021 up until April 2023, Jason and Steven actually have a cordial relationship because the pressure for extracting money is no longer there. In fact, a lot of the conversations you can see for yourself are rather benign, casual, sometimes not even about business. It's notably more human at times, with Jason even offering relationship advice to Steven and his marriage to John Moore. I mean, we even have Steven and Jason, contrary to the accusations filed by Steven in court recently, taking each other's mothers out to brunch and planning trips or buying each other event tickets. However, I think it's still fair of me to characterize their relationship, regardless of the positives we see, as still a love and hate one, especially when it came to money, equity, and business. Some notable things between March 2021 and April 2023 include the following text messages. Sometime after the new Ashes of Creation website goes up on March 2nd, 2021, Jason is presumably still asking for basic financial documentation from Steven. And on March 3rd, 2021, they have a phone call and a follow-up text conversation about that call where Steven says, "I'm done. If you want to tear the company apart over it, I won't fight. It'll just fall apart." To which Jason replies, "If you continue to act greedy, we won't be very good partners long term. Sorry you feel the way you do. My value is just as valuable as yours. The problem is you needed monies, and I came through over and over and over again. Treating me less valuable than yourself is pure greed. Sorry I changed my mind, but I didn't agree to waive my rights for that 15%. It is what it is. If you want to make an enemy out of me, then it will harm us and Intrepid, which is not what I want to do. You should pick your battles with me better." Steven then changes his mind a day later about quitting as CEO and says, "Jason, I am incredibly upset with the call we had yesterday, and honestly, I've been unable to even work yesterday or today as a result of where we left off in the conversation. I have worked tirelessly to build this company up, and trusted that our friendship was strong and fair. When we spoke in December and January, you assured me that I would have time to come up with a solution for you. I honestly do not even know how to move forward. Jason replies with kind words, saying things like, I am your biggest supporter and fan besides John and your mom. I do love and appreciate you. I also just love myself too as well. Yes, you have done an amazing job, but you need to allow some other people inside to help you on corporate governance. Steven responds positively, saying Jason's heartfelt message put his mind at ease and that he appreciates and loves Jason more than Steven loves his own biological brothers. Jason also responds in kind, saying he's trying to be Steven's partner, but he's never allowed to be one. About a week later, Jason sends a link to a 2021 Washington Post article going over how Roblox's initial public offering on the stock market is valued at a staggering $41 billion valuation. Steven hilariously responds to this, saying, I know my projections are conservative, but I am almost certain when we launch, we'll be very near that kind of valuation. For reference, revenue projections made by Intrepid Studios under Steven Sharif's guidance somehow predicted $17 million in revenue for 2022, and a whopping jump from $17 million to over $700 million for 2023 in yearly revenue. By the way, these revenue projections that we are sharing and were submitted in federal court were requested to be sealed against the public's eyes by Steven and his legal team. To understand the sheer scale of just $700 million in annual revenue, Ashes of Creation would have needed to generate the commercial equivalent of roughly 3 separate launches of Claire Obscure Expedition 33 within a single year. Speaking of sales, how about the NFT for Ashes? Steven reports in May 2021 that Ashes of Creation made $376,000 in sales in just under an hour. This is more than likely aligning with the timeline that we're familiar with when Alpha 1 pre-orders were reopened in May 2021 with the Adventurers Pack, explaining the surge in sales. Steven, after being asked by Jason, sends a screenshot showing a figure of over $643,000, with Jason remarking on the numbers being badass sale number for the past 48 hours, with the average order value being $182.55. Steven replies, I'm a badass. Grin emoji, grin emoji, grin emoji. As excitement and good news once again comes for Ashes of Creation, Steven states that it will be possible to sell around $100 million in their first month after launch day at 6 million registered users, should the average revenue per paying user be around $25. Steven comments that of the $1.1 million made so far in the last 20 days as of July 21st, 2021, they've only had 32 fortune tellers refund their order. Riding this high, Steven scoffs at Amazon's MMO New World, which released into beta testing the day before, and according to Steven, is likely going to be a complete failure. Not only is their software killing people's graphics cards because they fucked up, but the gameplay is terrible, which is what I've been saying all along. Our alpha is better than $1 trillion company's beta. Imagine what the fuck I could do if I had that kind of fuck you money. Ugh. This text message from Steven, seemingly showing disdain for New World and the work of its developers, honestly does not look great, considering his public face had shown sympathy and understanding for the people who were later laid off from Amazon Game Studios. Jason goes along with Steven at this point and says, well, you should call Jeff Bezos directly. Steven, being a billionaire gamer and not knowing Jeffrey Bezos personally, says he wishes he could, that he would sell him in a heartbeat, to which Jason says, maybe we just let Jeffrey Bezos buy Ashes of Creation and Intrepid for $5 billion in a few years. Steven clarifies that he wants to sell Jeffrey fucking Bezos on investing instead, claiming that Intrepid Studios will be the next Activision, which is a crazy thing to say considering Activision's assets, IPs, and overall net worth. Speaking of public people like Bezos, there are some public figures mentioned by both Jason and Steven in the text messages, including Osmongold, The Lazy Peon, Kira TV, and former K-pop star Park Jae-hung. The last one we were able to verify Steven himself responded to before we were banned and blocked for our coverage. Perhaps two notable figures being mentioned here as well are James Finney and Drew Guevara. James Finney, who is the CEO of Lost Lake Games, had worked on StarCraft, Guild Wars 1 and 2, and State of Decay, and apparently had a meal with Steven Sharif. Drew Guevara, who apparently did a video conference with Steven, works at Morgan Stanley and purportedly led the IPO of Roblox according to Steven. I've reached out to both Drew and James in the past few weeks for comment, but neither have responded, and I couldn't independently verify if Drew Guevara did lead the IPO of Roblox, as the only information I can find was that Morgan Stanley was one of the lead underwriters and advisors for Roblox alongside Goldman Sachs and other entities, and remained so when Roblox switched from a traditional IPO to a direct listing. Anyway, Steven claims that Drew Guevara did a quick rundown of Ashes of Creation's valuation, even sending a clip of Drew talking about it directly to Jason in text messages. The clip apparently has Drew valuate Ashes of Creation and Intrepid at $1.25 billion, billion, B as in boy, B as in Boeing, B as in BBJ. Jason, in the meantime, is still asking for financials and documents years and months later, while the value of Intrepid supposedly goes over $1 billion. Anyway, it's not just the players at this point that want more of Ashes of Creation and its sweet, supposed $1.25 billion gameplay. Jason wants some of that Alpha 2 action as well, almost constantly asking Steven, when is Alpha 2 gonna launch? A sentiment perhaps former Ashes of Creation players may sympathize with. Things keep going well despite the lack of an Alpha 2 launch for Jason. Development updates go well, live streams go well, the reputation of Ashes of Creation soars on YouTube. Jason wants to get 5 or 6 alpha keys for Ashes of Creation to hand out to his friends and family. The promised land of milk and honey is so close in the year of our Lord 2022 that Jason can taste it. Even more than 3 months later in 2023, Jason patiently awaits Alpha 2's launch, but also somehow is still waiting for basic corporate documents like a freaking cap table that has been mentioned so many times at this point I thought I was undergoing psychosis and hallucinating staring at my monitor while processing all these text messages. But fear not, don't worry about corporate documents or financial documents or taxes or whatever. There's even more good news on the horizon from Steven, as he texts Jason things such as, "Hey buddy, quick synopsis between my meetings of yesterday. Yesterday, met with NCSoft, Netease, Galaxy, and Jagex. All of them scheduled another meeting in the next 2 weeks. Jagex wants to discuss both investment and publishing. NCSoft, Galaxy, and Netease want to discuss minority investment. All of those meetings went exceptionally well. Last night, I attended a dinner with a bunch of executives and saw Riot there. They already have asked Kartik to schedule a meeting after GDC to discuss minority investment. I just finished meetings with Krafton and Scopely. Scopely is a huge potential. They're looking to bridge into PC gaming, and their entire team are huge fanboys of the project. The energy in that room was strong, LOL. Their head of global investments said, "We want to help bring this game to life. How can we?" So we have another conversation with them after GDC. Kartik is planning to come to San Diego next week to button up next steps. So far, going amazingly well. Things are, indeed, going amazingly well for Ashes of Creation in 2023. It's a hot topic in the MMO space, and more people are looking towards it as the last hope for the MMO genre. Even yours truly has paid $250 for Alpha 2 access following the 2022 updates from Intrepid Studios. But something happens soon. Something terribly goes wrong. An omen, if you will, that may have served as a portent of the bad times to come following the good times.
President left here at San Diego International Airport about 20 minutes or so ago. Let's take a look at some video that we have. This is President Joe Biden boarding Marine One here at San Diego International Airport. He's going to take off and land in Del Mar, and from there he's going to go over to Rancho Santa Fe. He's going to go to Rancho Santa Fe, where he's scheduled to fundraise, and that fundraiser is starting at about 6:45 tonight.
That's right. Former U.S. President Joe Ice Cream Lover Biden flew into San Diego because he too was fanboying over Ashes of Creation's Alpha 2 launch and was eager to invest, allegedly. Consequently, after Joe's visit, Jason and Steven start having heated arguments and phone calls on April 29, 2023, roughly 2 years after their relationship had cooled off. After a phone call took place between 8:19 p.m. and 8:46 p.m. on April 29, 2023, Jason says, "I don't care about your value anymore, is that clear?" Then Steven sends a thumbs up emoji. Jason continues to say, "Yeah, don't act like you're doing me any favors, Steven. Get me some money." Steven replies, I'm not. I offered a solution, Jason. I offered several ideas. I heard nothing but more of the same from you, man. I'm just over it. I'll take whatever consequences come my way. Jason says, because all you do is demean my value, saying I bent you over. Steven then says, I do not demean you or your value. You actually said to me on the phone, what have you done for me? Holy shit. Jason says, night bro, maybe we're not bros anymore. It's okay, I don't care anymore after $10.3 million out. Value that, asshole. I think this is hilarious how you think that a 51% equity position is the issue and a position to be in, when you can go online and look at what percentage Bezos owns of Amazon, what percentage of Tesla does Elon own. Go look before you continue to be the biggest, greediest asshole on the planet. Steven then says, Jason, everyone including Rob looked at that 30% deal and said, holy fuck, that was brutal. And you know what? The first 15% plus the other convertible notes and the non-dilutable is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And you are talking to me about greed. Rob told me on the phone 3 hours ago that in his opinion, as an attorney, your friend and the largest money giver in this company, that it was a fair compromise to do the following. Steven, value your $4 million at $80 million. Jason, keep the first 15%, and Intrepid pays down the LLC after the raise. His words. He even said that you told him you weren't going to hold me to the additional 15%, and I'm not even asking you to do what you said about converting his stock from your equity. Jason replies to all this saying, I can get him on the phone tomorrow. Go get me money on Monday, $6.1 million, and pay the debts. You can have your 15%, asshole. Steven shouts, I am not being greedy. I am offering something fair that we live with. Jason says, go read your spreadsheet. Yeah, you are, bro. I hate you. Good fucking luck. You're an asshole. Loud and clear. I won't ever help you again for the rest of my life. Spoiler alert, he does help him later on. Again. Jason continues, we won't be friends and you don't have to worry about taking me on any fucking jet rides. Honestly, bro, go give Rob 10% from your equity, greedy fuck. Steven says, it is crazy. Absolutely crazy that you are this way. What a waste of 8 years. Yeah, asshole, you learned a side of me you've never seen before. That's fine, Jason. I have nothing but my life to take. Go ahead. I'm done with this. Great. Don't give a shit anymore. You pushed me beyond my breaking point, greedy fuck. Go cry to John, to your mom, to Tom. This is the last time I ever help you again, greedy fuck. Lying, backstabbing cockroach. Don't call me brother, you fuck stain. You have no idea how you crossed the line with me. Friends and partners don't act like you do, ever. You're good at bullshitting people, including me, but again, you keep on thinking you can push me into a corner, threaten me with your abandonment of the company over what a lousy percentage that only a motherfucking greedy slime of a cockroach would say or do. Shameful and cowardly. I am disgusted by you. So go look in the mirror and tell yourself again why you think you own this company, because you don't. The moment you took people's money, you fuck. Again, you act like 8 years of your life. What about my life savings, my debt on my property, the 200 Bitcoin I had to pay T, worth now even at today's price is $6 million. You actually degrade me to a point that you push me into a corner to have to fuck you. Steven says, I created value for those contributions you just mentioned. A value with a 30 times return possible. I hate you for pushing me to this point, you motherfucker. Go call your mom and tell her that you would rather bury everyone than realize you're a greedy fuck, you son of a bitch. You get me now? Don't ever, and I repeat, ever fucking threaten me and my friend's business over your greed. And if you ever do this shit again, I'll fucking come unglued again. 3 years I didn't blow my stack and I just stood by and helped you. Motherfucking greedy cockroach, don't you ever treat me like this again. I honored you, valued you, and you shit all over me. Go fuck yourself. Now I can sleep peacefully because I know what I'm dealing with in you as a human being, greedy fuck. Steven calmly says, it's crazy. I created this value in return for you that is 20 to 50 times back what you put in, and I am the greedy person. Totally crazy. Jason says, yeah, you greedy cockroach. Go look in the mirror and go implode the company. Your value is not owning all your percentages. You're just a good con artist bullshitter. So you're good at fucking people thinking you're creating some 30 times return, but you fail to inform the public you're a fraud and con. Oh, let's inform the IRS and the federal lenders and the authorities for being a fucking con too, let alone your books and records and your bank statement and balance sheets. Again, stop lying, bro. You lie so much, you make everyone believe you're their savior. My name is Steven. I self-funded this company with $50 million of my own money and have no accountability to anyone or any board, so I can run run it like it's my own decisions 100%. So fuck you. I am so tired of your fucking lies. You're a good cockroach of a liar. So get a grip on reality. Rob caused this, you fuck you, because he was mentally done after $20 million, you asshole. So he said he wanted more equity. Get it, you fuck? You're a fuck, because you blame me for your own messes. Everything was fine between us up and until Rob asked for more equity and said he won't put any more into the company. Then you lose your shit over your equity. Steven replies, you know, through all of our disagreements, I've never once talked to you like this. I've always treated you like a human being, never denigrated, never insulted. I treated you and worked to build for us a fortune. You knew from day one that deal was a problem. I've offered solutions, you've offered nothing. Jason replies with whatever this is. You're a motherfucker. I am talking to you like you need to understand who you're fucking with. Push me more, asshole. You have no idea. Keep it up, bitch. My solution after you continue to act like a greedy fuck is to say fuck off, go cry, go beg, go implode the company and bury it. Only a motherfucking greedy cockroach would ever say that. Guess what? I don't care what you do. Bury it. Bury yourself. I don't care. Steven says, I already understand the consequences I am accepting. I offered compromises. Rob agreed with those compromises. I am not crying or begging. I have a right to quit when I feel taken advantage of, and I'm willing to find a way forward. But this is not it. Jason says, 3 years, I never lost my cool until this week. Spoiler alert, he's lost his cool multiple times before this week. Yes, you're right, you fuck. Go quit, I'll sue the fuck out of you. All good. Fucking asshole, it's cool. Keep going at this rate. You'll realize your world as you know it will be sleeping on your mom's sofa. Keep it up, fuck stain. You're the greediest asshole I've ever met. So understand, I will sue you for every penny and then some. So go ahead. Fuck with me some more, you fuck. Understand I won't go away. I'll fucking sue you forever. Tell your mom, tell Tom, tell everyone. Steven replies, Jason, what exactly do you think I have to take? Jason then says, I don't care. Go fuck off. You're worthless to me after tonight and threatening me and this company. That's the final straw. So again, make your bed again. You're going down a greedy route of behavior that'll end your world badly, all because Rob was mentally and emotionally and financially done here with your bullshit. It's all good to blame me and my extra 15%. Why didn't you say something to me 2 years ago when you took Rob's money, you fuckstain? My anger and hate is because you're a motherfucking greedy son of a bitch. Again, I never would have brought Rob into this knowing what a motherfucking greedy pathological liar you are. Shame on you. Steven says, 2 years ago, you said at the time whatever Rob's doing in the notes would come from your equity. Now that Rob wants 20% of the company, I'm saying instead to forgive the 15% penalty and accept the payback when we raise the money, and you disagree, which is strange because it's not very different. Jason says, no, it's not that I disagree, it's that you don't see what of a scumbag you are for making this my fault. Why do we care about whose fault it is? I offered a resolution, and a fair one that I still don't like, but I'm willing to do it. And Rob said he agreed with it. I could have said simply, Steven, give Rob equity 100% directly from yourself, no one else, and you don't have authority to dilute me at all. I don't care about fault. I didn't say that. What does this matter? I am suggesting a way forward, one that makes sense. I offered a resolution. Give me $6.1 million on Monday, and I give you back the 15%. Steven says, you offered a non-starter. That's not possible. It's not a non-starter, asshole. And you're aware of that, Steven says. The issue is you, not me. It's disingenuous. You. Your greed, not mine, Mr. 51% asshole. 2 years ago, you said at the time whatever Rob's doing in notes would come from your equity. Now that Rob wants 20% of the company, I am saying instead to forgive the 15% penalty and accept the payback when we raise the money. Again, a resolution. Jason says, you are a motherfucking liar, took in $34 million and couldn't pay me back anything. Fuck you. And then telling me I am greedy. Go fuck off, Steven. Damn, we should have just sold to Riot. I should have never listened to Rob not to take that deal. Jason laughs at Steven's statement about Riot. Steven says, crazy. Now you blame Rob, Jason says. What a piece of shit. Steven then says, I don't blame him. Now, quick interjection here. This purported Riot deal has been brought up by Steven Sharif's allegations against Robert Dawson and the rest of the Intrepid board members. Steven alleges that Robert Dawson was the one who got greedy and told Steven not to accept the Riot deal. However, the two exhibits that Steven shared in regards to this through the court does not show any evidence of Dawson telling Steven to reject that deal. Furthermore, a clarifying statement made by Trindamir, the co-founder of Riot Games, did confirm that there were discussions between Intrepid and Riot Riot about a possible deal, but that's it, only discussions. As far as we know, there doesn't seem to be a non-binding letter of intent or any commercial relationship between Riot and Intrepid, unless something else pops up in the future. But I also find it really interesting here that Steven also does not blame Robert for the purported Riot deal going up in flames, which again is contradicting his allegations in court. The argument continues from Jason's end, as he says, here's my option. I won't be diluted at all legally. You can't dilute me anyway. Go read your agreements. If you want to take in your $4 million at whatever valuation you want to, it's cool. It won't be legal, and I have documents to substantiate my position. I won't be told to give away my 15% for nothing after you spent $34 million in 2 years and didn't pay me a dime. You want my 15%? Make me an offer to pay me for it. That's $150 million, lol. I'll give you a 50% discount at $75 million. Steven then says, I'll send a recap with the options in the morning to you and Rob. Jason replies, how long do you want to have that term to pay for it? I'll give you 3 years and $75 million with 10% interest annually, total payment due May 1st, 2026. Sounds good, let's go. Since you think I'll bend over and get fucked, I'll show you what a motherfucking greedy son of a bitch asshole I am, Steven. Steven says, okay, then I won't send a summary of the options. Do whatever the fuck you want. Jason says, exactly. Greedy bitches don't do what's in the best interest of the group. I am doing whatever the fuck I want now by not giving a flying fuck about you anymore or your bullshit. Hope you're clear, asshole. Steven says, alright. Jason says, I hope you sleep well cause I will, knowing that my partner is a fucking greedy asshole and that he is willing to bury the company and hurt the two largest investors that have over $30 million between the two of them into the shithole. Tell your mom you're a greedy fuckstain as well as Tom, cause I sure will. Hope you can live with your greedy motherfucking self. So you see I don't give a fuck anymore. You push my buttons. So now I'll fucking push yours. Hope you know your bullshit and lies are about to be exposed all over to everyone. Steven replies, I don't think you understand, Jason. I'm done. Exactly my point. Don't care anymore, liar. I'll surely sue the fuck out of you for threatening this company. You pushed me too far, asshole. Now I'll show you. Okay, Jason. Do your worst, and I'll do mine. You can go to sleep and realize you can't push people like this. I don't care about your worst. It's simple. Done, Steven says. Shit on this company and shut it down, asshole. Thumbs up emoji, thumbs up emoji, thumbs up emoji from Steven. All good, Jason continues. I'll sue the fucking daylights out of you. Done! In all caps from Steven. Great, asshole. You told me I was greedy. You say all week, telling me my value was nothing. You threatened the company, me and Rob, over what? Your fucking equity? Are you kidding me? What a piece of shit. So sleep on what a horrible human being does that. Jason, after all of this, I actually don't even want anything. I'm really over it altogether. I have zero interest in continuing. Jason says, great, now you see how far you pushed me. This is now all you, bro. Sleep well, Jason says. You got what you wanted. Bicep curl emoji from Steven. Night. Jason then says, yep, you two understand how far you can push someone that loves you, and watch what happens after you humiliate them. You broke me, so now you understand how I feel. Steven angrily texts back and says, loves me? Are you fucking crazy? Look at this dit. Holy fuck. Jason says, after a cry to my house, yep, only a motherfucking greedy human being can push me to a point like this. Steven says, I bawled on the phone yesterday while I'm going fucking blind and my fucking mother, who I haven't been able to fucking visit in 7 years, is dying. Jason says, all I do is give, and even when I was hurt by you, I gave more. Steven says, fuck you. Great. Glad you're getting your emotions out just like me. Love it. Tell me again. It's healthy for you to say it. Remind yourself I am the greedy, liar, backstabbing motherfucker, okay? Night night, bestie. The next day, Steven texts Jason, I just spoke to Rob and my mom and Tom. If you want to agree to have a normal conversation tonight with a serious effort to find a resolution, we can try. Jason replies, I just sent a group text with the offer. This is fair after I spoke to Rob. I don't want to be on the phone unless Tom is on the phone as a mediator. Steven says, fine. If we want to ask Tom to help mediate, that's fine. But if you start going down into screaming and cursing, I'm hanging up and we'll get nowhere. Now, a mere 12 days later, Jason and Steven basically go back to loving each other. But what happened between these 12 days? For answers, we have to look at the group chat between Tom Alkazin, Steven Sharif, and Jason Caramanis. For context, Tom Alkazin is one of Steven's best friends and had allegedly been an early investor. Tom Alkazin recently sided with Steven in a legal declaration that alleges Ashes creation was not a scam, that Steven had told him the board members were coercing and intimidating Steven, and Tom even alleges Jason Caramanis had reached out to him on multiple occasions so Tom could be used as an emotional pawn against Steven in order to convince or coerce Steven into doing things Jason wanted. For you viewing again, the text messages are all up on the document link provided in the video description. However, I cannot personally detect, at least from the text messages, the details of Tom Alkazin's allegations in regards to Jason. In fact, it seems from the few text messages we have, Jason had reached out to Tom as a mediator multiple times to settle things between him and Steven, or to even just ask advice from about both Robert and Steven. In the group chat with Tom Alkazin and Steven, Jason says, "Only a greedy motherfucking asshole says that. Maybe he's just tired of lying." Steven says, "Tom, Jason would like to have you be an impartial mediator on the call between him and I, and he has agreed not to scream in curse in an effort to find a mutually agreed upon resolution. Are you able or willing to do that?" Tom says, "Yes, of course." Jason then sends a long text message saying, "I don't hate you, Steven. I just won't allow you to push me into a corner ever again, so think about your misrepresentations made to all of us and realize that whether through omission or otherwise fabricating things in order to elicit investment is considered fraud legally, and otherwise so again when we get on the phone and the debate is about your ethics or mine, we'll end up in another argument. Fact 1. Your emails and texts and verbal dialogue lied about your financial contributions. Fact 2. This led to me believing in the valuation I would never have agreed to on day 1 if I knew about it ahead of time. Fact 3. You had no issue for the last 2 years without agreement since Rob put in $20 million. Fact 4. All things changed in the last 3 to 4 weeks when Rob said I am done funding this for what little equity he had after $20 million into the company. Fact 5. I was in the same position in 2019 after $7.3 million when you told me the company was going to go out of business and you forced me to come up with $2 million I didn't have, and with emails going back and forth, what was stated, not stated, done, and not done, and all of your back and forth dealing, and you continue to state the wrong facts that I bent you over or held a gun to your head. Actually not the case. Please take the next 2 to 3 hours, Steven, to refresh your memories and to read the emails from August of 2019 through October 2019. I read them 100 times over and over. Sorry, no gun was used for you to sign agreements. Actually, I did demand or 151% control of the company for your inability to manage the company properly, and I settled on 15% with a 1-year term of the money to be paid back. Fact 6. Since that agreement was entered, you went through $32 million more between loans and convertible notes and didn't make any attempts to pay my debt back or any of my debts back, including 200 Bitcoin I had to pay worth now $6 million for the $1 million note that T was going to sue you for, and Intrepid, before I paid that off. Fact 7. When I brought Rob on board, you agreed that you were all okay, even with the punitive, as you call it, extra 50% for bringing in Rob at $8 million, plus helping get the additional $10 million, which he did personally. Fact 8. Rob is at his boiling point because of you, not me, bro, and when you can realize you're building a dream with everyone's hard-earned life savings, then maybe a reality will set in that you are way over your head. Fact 9. Implosion of the company due to your own greed is the last and final point you blame me for, and now I am the scapegoat. It's all good, bro, to make me the fall guy after $10.3 million and Rob's $18 million plus. But again, I want you to go back and read all the emails and threats you have so you can refresh your own mental state of failure, because this is 1000% you're doing, and if you implode the company because of your own greed, that's on you, 1000%. Here we have some screenshots being shared by Jason. Saying, I spoke to Rob. I'm willing to take 5% of the 30%, leaving me with 25% from my side. You can put your $4 million in an $80 million valuation after the 5% is taken. That's my compromise to give up equity to Rob. Steven then replies to the screenshot saying, we split the 10%. We honored the agreement of Rob's 5 being paid. We valued the $4 million at $80 million. Other point is we had to adapt because Rob's debt financing did not come through. So we recognized the additional 3.3% under the same agreement with Jason for the initial 5%. Interjection here, the $4 million that they keep mentioning is Steven Sharif's alleged $4 million investment into the company that seemingly no investor can find as of yet. Continuing, Steven says, I'll tell Rob that we have come to a tentative agreement pending review with counsel and a draw from now CFO regarding the cap table. Another screenshot shared from Jason says, emails sent, Rob, for your approval tomorrow to send wire. Hats off to Tom Alkazin for being a mensch and helping be a mediator. Couldn't have done it without him. While Tom Alkazin successfully mediates and everyone comes to a compromise about their equities and shares. Jason is also talking to Sharron Sharif, Steven's mother, about the latest argument, saying, "As God as my witness, I am not Steven's or anyone's enemy here. I am just as deeply saddened by the mere fact my friend put in $20 million so far and is threatened by Steven not making proper decisions as his fiduciary responsibility to us as shareholders. I know he has bled Intrepid for 8 years, but it's sad that his eyes or brain is myopic when dealing with sophisticated investors as Rob and me. I hope he rethinks his position this weekend before he blows up the company over greed."
My dear Jason, you know I have always loved you like another son. I hate to see Steven like this and you like this. My joy all these years of not being able to spend time with Steven is that he was doing something to be life-changing for so many. I hope you two can talk and resolve this as two brothers should. For everyone's sake, love you. Life is very short.
Jason then says, "I love you, and I love Steven very much, but greed and money blind people. I know he wants to be a billionaire so bad, but honestly, Sharron, he needs to have a heart-to-heart with himself, not me, not you, not John, and not Tom." Things eventually cool down again, with Steven sharing more information about issues with his eye and Jason reciprocating with pictures of his own eye issues from the past. They'll do the same thing 4 months later about their feet. Steven specifies that he has diabetic retinopathy and macular degeneration, and that a doctor had nicked his eye with a metal specula. The type 2 diabetes that Steven has was further corroborated by Steven's and his husband's private chef, who had reached out to us for an interview as their existence was contested for some time, which in turn corroborated the recent company general ledger and pictures Steven himself posted in the official Ashes Creation Discord server we had published. The private chef in the interview remarked that Steven was essentially eating himself to death with fast food that worsened his type 2 diabetes, that even doctors had told Steven not to eat such things, and Steven promptly ignored the medical advice. The diabetes and the pre-existing health issues Steven has is of some importance, as one of his allegations against the board members in federal court is that their coercion and intimidation contributed to his mental and physical well-being being affected to the point that he even ended up in the hospital due to kidney damage and other ailments. In a May 2023 text message, Jason says, "I am begging of you at your expensive desk and printer. I'm teasing but kinda serious. Please print the damn document Christine sent. Sign it, scan it, and hit the reply all. I don't know what you do, why you do, and operate the way you do, when the people around you are getting to a point of not wanting to support you because you can't follow through in small things for the last 30 days. Jason also understandably gets upset when even Robert Dawson contacts him after midnight saying Steven still has not yet signed the necessary papers. Jason goes on a tirade saying, "Sorry you're going through a lot, I'm just tired of not handling things properly and that we can't get simple things done here. I don't want to bug you, but if you make me look bad again, I'm gonna get so fucking pissed off. Just do as I asked unless you have a serious problem. This isn't a material issue to you, but I've given my word to Rob. Please handle this before I wake up. Good night." Bro, what's going on? If Rob calls me, what do I say? You're a fucking flake, seriously. I can't keep doing this with you. It serves no purpose for me to get upset. I don't like not honoring my word. Anyway, if I wake up and this isn't done tomorrow, I have no idea what Rob will fund or not fund anymore. He has made it clear with me he is not happy. Anyway, I waited for a simple fucking document all day and night. Steven finally responds at 2:35 a.m. on May 31st, 2023, saying, "Hey, I just got home. I cannot answer because we'll have hundreds of thousands of viewers tomorrow, including all the strategics, and this stream will have a couple million views from all the influencers. If the showing was not good, we will be in a very bad spot. I messaged Rob and told him you and I are meeting this weekend. I am unable to sign that document until you and I have spoken in person. If you can message Rob as well when you get up and let him know you and I will be meeting this weekend to work things out and reaffirm we'll get him the docs he needs. I have to be up in 4 hours. I will text you after the live stream ends today at 2ish. Jason is left confused by Steven's reply and says, "I don't understand your issue or position if you're refusing to sign something we already agreed upon with Tom on the phone over a month ago. Answer Rob, not me. I'm cool with it. Just makes me look good and you look bad in everyone's eyes. If it's a legal reason, you better explain immediately. Honestly, I could care less at this point in doing anything anymore because when I try and help, it just makes me more angry. You want to meet to discuss why you don't want to sign that document we already agreed to? Makes no sense to me. You could have had a calm call about this within the last 30 days, but avoiding this is making me lose my stack. Ball is in your court to do as you wish. Oh, and by the way, that cap table they keep bringing up, it's brought up again and again and again and again. There's apparently still no cap table as of 2023 at this point, almost a decade after the formation of Intrepid Studios. 6 months later, in January 2024, there's still no cap table, it seems, so things are actually looking pretty great for Ashes of Creation. To give some context for the next amount of text messages, the Santa Fe mansion that Steven Sharif and his husband John Moore had lived in has become very central to the litigation unfolding in the Federal Court of California between the board and Steven. Steven alleges without any proof or exhibits that he accepted a predatory mortgage from Robert Dawson and the Nebraskan bank Pathway Bank, which was used to financially threaten him and his husband so that Dawson and the board could effectively control Steven. Based on public property records that we cross-referenced with the Intrepid Studios general ledger, house payments were being made from the business account to a Gore oil company that owned the property before John and Steven took it over, so definitely watch that video for more context. We also have text message exhibits from Robert Dawson that contests Steven's allegation, showing Steven actually approached Robert as he couldn't get a loan or refinancing as he had 2 liens on the mansion property he had often live-streamed from for the Ashes of Creation community. Robert alleges that Steven had no other options as other traditional lenders refused. Jason also corroborates this with the text messages I'm about to show you. But ultimately, this house is important because another allegation from a different board member is that Steven was afraid of losing $1.3 million in escrow from putting his house sale up as collateral, and Commerce West Bank, which held the lien that needed to be paid back, wasn't apparently being made aware of the Steam funds that Intrepid had procured after pushing Alpha 2 to the Steam Early Access. The board claims they were going to pay off the employees and eventually Commerce West Bank with the Steam funds, but Steven, after not allegedly getting the equity he wanted, alerted the bank about the Steam funds, which eventually got frozen by Valve somewhere along the way, thereby allegedly, according to the board, screwing everybody, including the employees, over. Now, Steven and other Intrepid Studios executive employees obviously dispute the board's claims, but I think the text messages here, at the very least, definitely show Steven being in financial trouble and asking for help with his mansion, which is bizarre on a few levels considering the information we have surrounding this legal fight, but also stays rather consistent with Jason's giving character thus far. In the first video, Jason is shown to have withdrawn from his personal 401k for Steven's Ashes of Creation project when he had no money. Jason was willing to sell 2 cars for liquid cash to help Steven and Intrepid employees make payroll. Jason sold an absurd amount of Bitcoin that, would he have held it, would have made him unfathomably richer in 2026, so it's not surprising to me at this point what we're about to go over. On March 27th, 2024, Steven texts, "Hey Jason, Rob told me you're trying to help me with my home situation. I appreciate it. I am trying to scramble every other direction I can, but it isn't looking good. And on top of everything happening at the company, it's overwhelming. You're my only hope right now, and they have a forbearance agreement. I can't believe how Andy, the lender, has been acting, completely unwilling to negotiate and is having an attorney ready to file Tuesday. If you need appraisals or anything, I've already gotten 2. I was approved for refinancing, but because of the company loan in the second position, no bank will touch it. Definitely don't know what to do, stuck at the moment." Jason replies, "This is so sad. Can you scrape $2 million together? Even though we have had our differences and animosity, I don't want my friend and brother losing his home." Steven says, "Yeah, I haven't slept more than an hour in the last 3 days. It's bad at the moment. I know we've had our differences. I don't harbor animosity. I just have my head down trying to deliver life-changing opportunity for the people in this deal I care about. I appreciate you and the willingness to step in and help. I can maybe scrape together $200,000-ish. I am totally just absent of any resources. Sad face." Jason says, "Does anyone you know have $2 million? I can maybe do $2 million. I told Rob. I'm just in a bad situation at the moment also." Steven says, "I wonder if Rob can do $2 million. Jason says, "My cash flow is drying up fast. I don't make anywhere near what I made before. Can you send me an email with an appraisal and the current agreement with your existing lender?" "Yes, give me about 1 to 2 hours, trying to finish recording for the livestream show." On March 29, 2024, 2 days after the last text message exchange, Steven says, "Hey buddy, are you able to chat this morning?" Jason says, "Just woke up, give me 45 minutes, talking to Rob about your loan when he lands. God, I love and hate you at the same time. Wish I knew about these issues months ago. I might have been able to plan for it." Steven says, sad face. I was trying to get it done with a lender, and the damn business loan and second fucked me. I just started our monthly live stream. I hope you know you're saving my ass helping. I appreciate you very much. I'll come back tenfold. Jason says, so you have a current title report you can send me? Can you talk? I have a lender name, been on the phone. Steven then says, on air for the next hour, 200,000 viewers. I have to interject here because I haven't been able to find any evidence of a live stream that had 200,000 viewers on March 29, 2024. I also kind of find that, you know, during that live stream that all of us are watching, this text message exchange is going on too without any of us knowing about it. Jason then says, also, I need the information sent to me on all documents with Main Street for the second and its communication with you and Commerce West and why they won't allow you to refinance the property and escrow with title. Steven says, I sent the title and loan agreements. Commerce West Bank is the administrator of the loan. The government only agrees to subordinate the loan, but the lender I had said they need to release the second loan entirely for 46 months until after the refinancing, and the government is unwilling to do that. Jason then says, can you send me the document you signed putting up your house with Commerce? What happens if you lose your house and Main Street loses the collateral? Steven then sends a copy of said document where he put up the home as collateral. Jason then says, I assume the loan is a second, and why you can't refinance is the fact that the loan is much greater than the value of the house combined with the first and the second loan. I didn't know you even had a first loan on the house, bro. That was coming due. You never told me these things. Steven then says, yes, the refinancier said no bank will touch it because of the second loan being $5.2 million and the first loan being $4 million. I know, sad face, sad face. I had a very good relationship with Andy who held the first loan, but he completely turned on me, and instead of giving me more time to find non-traditional lenders, he sent an attorney after me and said he won't give an extension and plans to foreclose. And also the bank told me they could get the government to take off the second for a few months while I refinance, but the government community said they won't remove it. Does the government know they would lose their money and they are not in first position on Intrepid? Yes, Steven says. The bank said it's the government and nothing they can do. Bank only has 5% exposure in this loan. I spoke to their CEO named Ivo. Jason, still trying to help Steven at this point, says, I wish you would have trusted me more years ago. I would have helped clean your life and world up so much, and now you and I would not be second and third position with Rob owning Intrepid. Don't get me wrong, I am okay with Rob. He saved and still been saving the company, but the cost of him doing so is so much when 2 to 3 years ago we should have had books and records all cleaned up for institutional investors. So anyway, I told Rob I'm trying to see what I can do here for you. Steven says, I've just been in a dark hole these last 4 years. It's bad and my life is suffering. Sad face. I'm so close to the finish line but feel like I'm crawling on my last limb right now. Sad face. Jason says, I know you're doing your best because everyone that means something to you is counting on you. 2 days later, on March 31st, 2024, Steven says, hey bro, how's it going? I'm struggling tonight. Sad face. Rob told me he has a way to help with half. Jason says, I just texted Rob. I was with family all day Easter, so I wasn't able to connect. When is the due date on this? It has to be paid by April 2nd. 2 days left for 3 people to figure out how to handle 2 separate multi-million-dollar liens, I think is crazy. I also think it's a little bit funny here that Jason mentions the MLM company Jagex, and Steven Sharif has absolutely no problems with where Jason's money is coming from here, when right now he's trying to expose the alleged MLM board members trying to scam gamers in court. Steven says, okay, thank you for trying. You'll be saving my ass again. The good news is that this should be short term, like within the year, with Alpha 2 launching in August 1-ish of 2024. That will alleviate stress on Rob and should give some payments back on your interest. Jason says, I'm just wanting you and the company to be sound and survive. Never thought I would say it, but it's hell trying to start a tech-based company. If Jagex had not fallen apart like it did, and I still had reasonable cash flow, I could be more help, but I'm trying to figure out what's next after 15 years with Jagex. Fast forward to late April, and Steven is having what seems to be marital issues with John Moore, who's about to become a lot more central to these text messages. We also get a little bit more details about how Jason and Robert helped Steven keep his mansion. Steven says, it's more the kitchen sink right now, but I told Rob in my opinion solving the MSLP would solve this issue and let us move forward with the settlement, but I'm knee deep in the argument right now with John. Okay, sorry, Jason replies, you know I borrowed money from Rob's bank to pay your house. Everyone is stressed at this point. To be honest, I wouldn't have done this deal if I believed I would be waiting 8 to 11 years to see my money come back to me. I didn't want to see you get evicted and foreclosed upon, but I was able to help. This is not mine or Rob's fault, and honestly, it's not yours or John's. We all got kind of fucked with the Tencent and iDream Sky, and then moving to Real Engine number 5, Unreal Engine 5, and it's taking so long in development, and none of this is your or John's fault, as Jason tries to comfort Steven. It's just the pressures of it all on every level are ripping people emotionally apart, including me. According to Jason's story, even after the mansion was bailed out by him and Robert Dawson, Steven's husband John Moore remained obstinate and was unwilling to sign any document whatsoever as CFO or as an individual. John Moore was apparently the actual owner of the majority of the shares of the stock in Intrepid Studios and not Steven Sharif, which may explain the curiosity of John Moore being the creator of the Ashes of Creation Kickstarter. On April 26, 2024, Jason says, "Tell Rob where you and John, or at least you, are meeting him and resolve things, please. The respect level John is showing all of us is not good at this point. Just understand I am politely telling you to grab John and go meet Rob, or you need to go meet Rob alone and come to a resolution. Honestly, if I was him, I would have pulled the funding over a year ago, since you and John didn't give proper governing documents. John's a part of you regardless if he wants to bury his head in the sand and say, 'Oh, I didn't know Steven did everything.' Then if that's the case, you need to get out of this relationship and figure out how to save your company and your house. I've said enough to make you understand we are DEFCON 1. Condition red. And if John, who is a game player, should know this is real, it will get ugly by all parties. I'm telling you that point blank. Wishing you strength. It's a seriously difficult situation by all accounts, stuck between your future and your future. The best option is get John to execute and continue having a job. Next option is he resigns and he turns everything over to you, and you sign a hold harmless agreement that everything is on your shoulder. At that point, John is out of the company and he can still be your spouse. If that's not the case, then you need to understand nuclear war is a button pushed by Rob, and this is where we're at. I have to start suing you and start aggressively attacking you and the company and simultaneously put you into involuntary bankruptcy, and then also file a TRO, temporary restraining order, removing you and John from the company. And during this process, Rob seizes all funding. You don't have a job and payroll is obliterated. Then we are picking up dead carcasses and all the broken pieces of Humpty Dumpty, and we can't put it ever back together again the way it was. Maybe only some pieces we have to help save Intrepid and Ashes. I know you're emotionally dealing with your relationship at this moment, but your entire life and livelihood is all dependent on meeting with Rob and rectifying things. I hope you get that loud and clear, and so does John. I have a good night. As I said, it's best you grab John and go get a drink and cocktail with Rob and try to settle this better tonight than in the morning. Again, you don't listen that well so hard to the wise. Tonight he can relax and have a drink and chill with you and John, or just you. Tomorrow you will not have time to rectify things, and he will leave after you meet for 30 to 40 minutes, and then what? Nothing. So it's best for you to call him and go grab a drink with him. John and you need to read the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Would help you and John greatly in understanding group dynamics and people. Steven replies to all of Jason's advice and says, in the middle of fighting with John, but feel making progress. I texted Rob and he said we can meet in the morning at 7. Jason says, okay, hope you get very real and serious with John. I can talk to him for you, but I know you don't want more drama. Either he gets it, only thing, please don't share this with John, but only thing why this would make sense is if he wants to kick you out of the house or file for divorce. Nothing else makes sense. You're with him now, so I can't call you, but the whole argument is over the second position of the loan for MSLP, which is a debt by Intrepid, so that gets paid off first out of any and all monies that come in. Maybe that's an addendum that the board agrees upon. I am okay with that. Because why remove it and place it somewhere else? It still has to be paid off by Intrepid, not the third party. Unless Intrepid defaults, then they go after the third party, in the current case, John and your house. Maybe he's worried that Intrepid will never make it and we all lose, and he still wants to keep the house. I just don't understand his irrational or rational position. I wish he could explain it because it makes no sense. I hope you and Rob and John resolve some things. Before me and Rob and you make decisions here, I recommend you make a decision about your future. If John doesn't sign this and we all go forward peacefully, your relationship as you know it will cease to exist. So again, my friend, I want you to know that you, me, and Rob trying to do things peacefully will turn very, very ugly for you and John's personal relationship. So again, you better grow a big pair of balls and be the man and lay down some serious foundation. Because once I start this process and start getting ugly, there will be no turning back from it, and John is directly in the crosshairs of this. Steven then reports that he met with Rob this morning. I'm in the middle still of it right now with John, just trying to understand what it takes to get him to bow out and sign over everything to me. We would need to get his name off the loan and transfer it to me or something. Tonight I'm talking to Rob and the attorney also. Jason then says, can you please send me an email the entire Main Street lending loan package that was executed for Intrepid along with the pledge of the second on the house as collateral? The problem is the house now. Your name is not on the house, is it? No, Steven says, only John's is. Yeah, he wants to file for divorce, Jason concludes, and isn't telling you. Read between the lines. None of this makes any sense. Steven then replies, asking, what do I do? Jason says, tell him to sign over everything and leave or be sued and stand up and be the fucking man he claims you're not being. You want me to be honest? That's it. You need to put your wife in check. You put everything in her name, and now she's feeling fearful. Instead of having your back and fighting, she is running scared. Sad face, Steven says. It's crazy to me how John is acting at this point, just after Rob and I saved his and yours house. Honestly, bro, I don't know what to say or do at this point. It's only gonna get messy from all of us. Steven then says, I need more time to try to bridge this issue. I think there is a possibility I can resolve this. It makes no sense, and if we give it another week or two, the emotional stuff will subside. That's the only thing I can think of, besides the house idea. Arguing for him and I is laborious. The other issue is that Rob is applying outside pressure to resolve this right now immediately, and that isn't how this works, and that pressure with paying bills adds to John's willingness to fight. Jason replies, I get it, but understand John's the owner of records of the company. The pressure will get worse because John and you don't understand these words. Fiduciary duties. Again, I've refrained from doing anything, waiting for you and Rob and John to resolve your differences. For years, I've been waiting, bro. It's not like a few weeks or months. What is Rob's outside pressure? Steven says, outside pressure meaning he wants this resolved now, and it may take more time than right now. Jason then replies, okay, well just understand that you nor John have done this properly. What I will do on Monday is send a demand letter to turn over 100% of all the company stock held by you and John, not to be in my name but to be turned over according to my pledge and security agreement. This is the first part of the foreclosure process. I've done this all before and can explain to you and Rob what the process is, but it's not going to be fun. And if John refuses to capitulate on the demand with the pledge and security agreement, then all bets are off and I'll have to start suing him, you, and Intrepid in the public domain. The problem is that no one issued any stock certificates to anyone at any time. Steven then says, I think that the best hope right now to salvage the situation is giving me some time to broker the issue with John and get the settlement documents executed. Jason continues to say, and also John doesn't understand how he's responsible for this and all he does is blame you. I get it, but you trusted your spouse and now your spouse is turning on you. He just needs to know that him fighting today is nonsensical. Steven says, this has been an argument land since Sunday and the past 2 days it feels like I've made progress. Then it goes backwards a little bit. Jason assures Steven saying, in 4 to 6 months all is resolved, Main Street paid off, you can tell him all his personal memorabilia at the house he won't own after I'm done with him. I will bankrupt him personally if he fucks with me. Anyway, let that sink in. Steven says, I think I need to tell Rob he has to give me some more time. Forcing this isn't going to solve it, but I can massage it. At least that's what it feels like in my 14th experience with John. I need time to deliberate this issue. Jason then says, maybe you don't know after I sue people what happens. I get judgments, then I collect. Then I bring them into court for debtors exams. Then I make them turn over every personal item of property they own, including jewelry and everything else. Not joking, my attorney had someone turn over their Rolex watch in the courtroom. Steven then says, I understand. What I'm saying is that path isn't the best path for you, me, or Rob. I need another week or so to fully navigate this argument, and I feel like I can get John to sign over to me. My point is, all of this is getting to the worst case scenario, which is nuclear war for John, Jason says. Steven replies, I hear you. Read what I said. I'm trying to navigate right now. Jason asks, is Rob going to put more money in the company by April 30th? Steven says, I don't know. I'm talking again to him tonight. Payroll, Jason reminds Steven. Maybe you need to fire John, Jason suggests. Steven says, I'm trying a different approach, one that John responds better to, which is attention, love, conciliation, etc. That is what moves the needle best in these situations. I know best how to try and solve the issue in the marriage. At this point, Jason starts giving some more relationship advice here, saying, you keep on asking for more time to help you and John, and all I can say is this ungrateful motherfucker only has a fucking roof over his head because I borrowed money to save yours and his house, which isn't your fucking house, it's his. I told you that yesterday. You need to make love, have some time together, connect, and see if you can rekindle some love. Steven says, I am trying to. You do not understand the stress and pressure that is happening at the same time. This is an impossible situation for a human being to deal with. I'm at my stroke point. Jason says, anyway, I get it. He is your wife, but having a wife in your corner means the good, the bad, and ugly. Ride or die spouse. I agree, Steven says. Tell him that, Jason says. You're my ride or die. I have, Steven says. I'll text you later tonight. I'm working it. Jason then thinks out loud on April 27, 2024, asking Steven, does John think you're cheating on him? Steven then says, LOL, no. Okay, so is he cheating when he leaves you for a week? Jason asks. I'm at work with him all day and night, Steven says. No, he's with his mom. Okay, then he is broken inside, Jason concludes. When he met you, you were fun, playful, not stressed. Steven then says, now I'm depressed and stressed. I get it. You did drink Pepto-Bismol though, Jason laughs. Steven says, I have to go try and deal with this. We'll text you tonight. Jason replies, bottom line, you're at the finish line with a guy that's put in almost $50 million in your company. And then me and him just saved your and John's house. Be safe and good luck. Steven then relays to Jason later on that he talked to Rob and John, and that hopefully John will come around on handing over the shares and all the documents and so on. during a trip to Las Vegas. Jason then says, okay, I hope and pray it does, because I know Rob is covering payroll. If it doesn't get handled after this, he'll blow his stack. I've done all I can on all parts, so no need to call me back unless you need me for something. Presumably, the situation was not solved by Steven, because 10 days later, on May 11th, 2024, Jason says, did you see Rob's final email? I also left you a voicemail message. He is not budging. So again, here we go. Stressful days coming up for everyone. Steven then replies, let Rob sleep and then have a heart-to-heart over the phone and do what you do best. De-escalate his attitude if he yells or argues and talks to him about the sensibility. You are the master of negotiation and meditation. You can't text me 5 minutes later and say, well, I tried, lol. I need you to really go to bat in the best way you know how to, for all our sake. I know this is a stress inducer and not what you want, Jason. And all I can say is I'm in the dungeon for 24/7, and I need you in my corner for both of our sakes and the sake of our friends and family. Jason then says, Steven, can you write an email explaining your consent provisions and what that means to you? Steven says yes. Jason asks, if Rob and you don't agree and Rob doesn't fund payroll by Tuesday, do you have any other options for money to come in? Steven mentions that they need funding by Wednesday morning and that he's talking to a different investor. And Jason agrees that maybe that's a good option. Jason then continues to say, I spoke to Rob, but the issues around trust with everyone are gone, so he doesn't trust you anymore on many levels, as do I. I love you, but don't trust you, as waiting 5 years or longer to do the right things, especially the last 2 years. However much you see your valued position in things with this company and its value, the issue is that nothing has been easy dealing with you and your shareholders, including me. The last thing Rob said is if Steven wants some incentives on things, maybe we can do something there. But the issue is you both can't even get a shareholders agreement done. So I'll wait and see, as I'm trying to help resolve issues between you and him. I see your position clearly, and honestly, I think if this would have been handled over 6 months or 1 year or 2 years ago, the sheer anger and disdain Rob has for you would not exist. The mere fact we both saved your house, I think, says enough for both of us, and I'm saddened by the fact that you and he can't communicate to get the shareholder agreement finalized. I hope and pray you and he can best resolve this issue. I think you need to trust Rob at this point, as we both have trusted you. He doesn't want to have all these gotchas in Section 4, so my only hope is that you and he can compromise before Tuesday and resolve this. Do you want to talk more or talk tomorrow? Interestingly, the following day on May 12, 2024, Steven posts a screenshot of a text message from Robert that says, on control issue, you should have 100% creative control. On financial control, the only issue I could ever see is an equity transaction that I might want that you would not. In the event that ever happened and we didn't agree, I'd give you a 30-day right of first right refusal to buy me out at terms consistent with an offer that we had that you didn't like. Other than that, I don't see where we would ever have issues. What days are Riot and Amazon coming? And speaking on control, right now you two are 2 of 3 directors. This line of thought from Robert seems to have some basis in an earlier discussion from April 2023, where Jason shares something from that group chat with Steven's mother, Sharron Sharif, and Tom Alkazin, saying, I agree with you, Rob, 1000%. Steven and I had a good talk yesterday, but he is not capable of managing company on this level, as he can't properly paper up a company in order to raise the next round, and we need you. I wanted your involvement from day one, but Steven needs to honestly agree to all you said and honestly get out of the way and allow you and me to put this company together for the raise. When a deep discovery starts to happen, no one will touch this company as it stands, and Steven needs to put aside his ego and pride and step out of the role of chairman of the board and just be good at what he is good at, creatively directing the vision of the game, whilst allowing you and me to govern it from the capacity to get us to around the $50 to $100 million raised. I too am expressly and deeply disturbed by Steven's position on so many levels that I do not trust him at all. I can still do business with him, but my trust is over. Steven doesn't adhere to any written agreements he creates or agrees to expressly mind, which again, he doesn't even read the agreements he signed properly, as if he did. He can't even legally do what he's attempting to do on any level legally, or otherwise based upon his agreements signed and documented. Steven, I don't want to alarm you, but you didn't even read my agreements that prohibit you from issuing yourself more equity on any level or capacity without increasing mine, which I didn't even want to point out or argue with you about yesterday because you would rather bury the company than face reality. Again, I am willing to compromise Rob, as it serves no purpose for me to act in a way that would threaten harm to Intrepid. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. I wish Steven would understand that you owned only 33.3% of a company and made $500 million. Steven, you can't see the light through the trees, but even being the largest shareholder with, let's say, after all notes converted, and even a new raise, you would still own over 40% and maybe 45% and be the largest shareholder by far, still double what I would have and almost triple what Rob would have. So again, something in your brain upstairs needs to switch, and you need to get off this ego trip of your own value or equity role in this company and start acting like a team player before you destroy this company. After a phone call conversation, Steven and Jason revert to texting. Jason saying, just battling Rob at this point makes no sense to me and you're putting the company at risk. If you want to send your email, you can, but you do so at your own risk. Simpler, easier email goes like this. At this point, I believe both Jason and Steven are discussing the best way to talk to Robert Dawson, and Jason is trying to give advice to Steven about how to approach Robert. And Jason continues to give the advice saying, hey Rob, I am waving the white flag. I am sorry and I apologize. Just I have been fearful that at some point you may want to get rid of me, and that fear after putting my heart and soul rings bells in my ears. But as I have been given trust with you for almost $50 million to date, I also need to trust you at this point and just agree to your terms in the shareholders agreement. Please send over your final agreement so I can execute it and sign it immediately for you. Thanks so much, Steven. So this is the message that Jason wanted Steven to send to Robert Dawson. And then Jason says, I'm going to bed. Hope you can understand everyone is tired at this point. And yeah, I see all your points. And honestly, I don't disagree with you if you had done this years ago. But too much water has fallen under the bridge and Rob is mentally done. So again, I've given you my brotherly advice as hard as that is. Hope you can understand that and make decisions accordingly. Love you, and I tried. Steven presumably did not exactly take Jason's advice or really keep to the same format or content, as he says, in shower, I adjusted the email and sent to him. Jason then remarks, bro, that was the wrong email to send. Now you will not like my next move. I forwarded the email to you, Steven says, added more to the email. Jason then says, this is just stupid on your part. Don't call or text me anymore. It's a waste of my time to even try and help you. Lose this number. Communication at this point dies down as 4 months later, Steven texts Jason if he can call Steven. And then 2 months later, in November 27, 2024, Steven again reaches out to Jason and mentions an Eric. Between 3:36 p.m. and 4:05 p.m., there was a phone call in which Jason told me that Steven wanted Jason to sell or get a loan against Jason's remaining cryptocurrency and had a hard money lender called Eric, quote, try and punk me for some absolutely stupid amount of crypto for what Steven needed. This was Jason's last straw, and he was finally done with it all until almost 2 years later, he would come out to the public and tell his side of the story, showing us what Steven Sharif was presenting publicly may not have been the reality. We do have a few more text messages to share from other group chats, including ones with Steven Sharif's mother, Sharron Sharif, Tom Alkazin, and of course Steven himself. Presumably after the board called the investors meeting that called for more capital, Jason texts Tom Alkazin saying on January 16, 2026, hey Tom, if you want to chat, let me know. I think you were on the call with everyone on Wednesday, so it's kind of rough going on everyone's part, but I knew that at some point it would get messier than it already had and has been. Please let me know if you care to chat or not. Otherwise, wishing you Happy New Year. Tom Alkazin replies, hey Jason, thanks for the message. Hey, I'd love to chat with you. I got to go out of town tomorrow. Maybe we can catch up on Sunday. 2 days later, Jason says, did you want to chat this evening? I'm available, just finishing watching the Rams and Bears game. By the way, for those of you who are curious and are football fans, the Los Angeles Rams did win that game. Then, as the public starts speculating about the implosion of Ashes of Creation and what went wrong with Intrepid Studios that ended up in the mass layoff of over 200 developers, Jason texts Tom Alkazin again, saying, things are really, really bad. Steven decided to fuck Rob over and destroy the company publicly, so again, it's gonna get ugly because of Steven's narcissism. I feel bad about your situation with your wife going through her stuff and finding out all this, but the truth is that Steven decided to destroy the company and will be suffering the rest of his life financially and criminally. Then, on the 5th of February, 2 days later, 2026, Jason says, Tom, I need to have a serious chat with you about monies for and to Intrepid. I don't want to accuse you of anything, but I need to have an understanding of things pertaining to you and monies in and out of Intrepid before I start going after everyone. Tom replies, sure, just got Bethany home today from the hospital and surgery this morning. Let me take care and we can connect on the weekend. Jason then says, okay, this whole thing has stressed me out beyond. I can't believe what Steven did after everything Rob did for him to go into YouTube and Reddit and just type in Ashes of Creation and see for yourself. 3 days later, Tom says, Jason, as an update, Bethany's really sick, lots of different issues. I can be available Tuesday afternoon if you still want to talk. Thanks. Jason replies, yes, please. It's not deathly urgent, but it is very important. Talk on Tuesday afternoon. Tom then says, I'll call you then. Then another 3 days later, on February 11th, 2026, Tom Alkazin says, Jason, I'm sorry, but I'm not mentally in a place to talk. Bethany has been extremely sick with a number of her health problems, all flaring at the same time. My focus is totally on her health. That, along with the Ashes mess, it's all more stress than I can handle right now. Steven empathizes and says, understood, I just need to document some things as legal aspects are about to happen so everyone has stress levels included. I don't think you're involved with the scam Steven portrayed to all of us, but it's imperative we talk before I unload worse than the FTC. 4 days later, on February 15th, 2026, Jason, once he gets a hold of the QuickBooks data for the Intrepid Studios ledger and accounts, realizes in horror that Tom Alkazin may have been involved in the suspect transactions allegedly made by John Moore and Steven Sharif that amount to at least over $10 million missing dollars. Jason says, "Good luck to your fucking life, you son of a bitch, lying backstabbing human being. I am coming after you and Bethany and everyone else. Go fuck yourself for lying to me, you're a cockroach. Can't wait to see you in court. You're a fucking liar, complete con job, just like Sharron and Steven, and you'll pay for this fraud." Jason then sends a picture of a computer screen, presumably showing the QuickBooks data, and says, "What do you call all of this, you fucking piece of shit? Can't wait to see you in the deposition defending your fraud. Just letting you know I'll destroy you publicly for being the con fucker you are, and I'm coming after you with vengeance, you son of a bitch motherfucking cockroach. Go tell everyone you know what a son of a bitch asshole I am. I can't believe you sucked out $750,000 out of this company and lied to me about it. What a cockroach you are for a man I respected, and as my elder, you become a disgusting human being. You're just trash." And then another 2 months later, on April 14, 2026 at 8:50 p.m., Jason texts Tom Alkazin again saying, "Read your piece of shit lies in your declaration, you piece of shit. Can't wait to get you and your wife in depositions, liar and cockroach as you are. What a piece of work you are. I begged you for help so many times and you lied. Can't wait to prove all of this in your discovery and depositions. What a liar you are. Threatening that I would depose you and sue you is not a threat, it's the truth. It's all good. I see what scum I am dealing with." Jason would also send text messages in the group chats as well earlier this year telling Sharron Sharif and Tom Alkazin, "I am coming after all you fucks." Then Jason posts a picture of a lawsuit. "Be prepared to enjoy your retirement by being backstabbing liars. $2 million between all of you. It's pathetic what liars you all are. You should be ashamed at your age, so fucking pathetic. Enjoy the rest of your lives and see you all in depositions, court hearing, and being subpoenaed and also being sued." So that's it. That's the conclusion to Jason Caramanis' story, at least for the time being. With Jason successfully serving John Moore and Steven Sharif at their April hearing against the board, the battle now shifts from the court of public opinion to the legal system. I also want to be transparent with you all. This will likely be my last major Ashes of Creation deep dive video for a little while, and I'll tell you why. As a forward, despite some bizarre intimidation tactics and suggestions that I lose everything if I continued my coverage, I want to be very clear. I'm not scared, and I'll never be coerced into silence. I value the truth and my own independence far too much to be swayed by really weird, empty threats. This definitely isn't my first rodeo fighting with a corporation, or in this case, the corpse of one. Additionally, my interest has always been the human element, the stories, the motives, and the unique perspectives behind the scenes. Right now, many of the key players are turtling up due to the ongoing litigation, including, of course, Steven Sharif, who has been strangely contradictory in his approach to this channel and its coverage. Until there is a meaningful interview or a direct conversation I can publish, I'm not interested in bogged down reporting on every minor legal detail or filing. If there's a massive development, I'll let you know, but otherwise, I think the trail has gone cold on the human side of things for the time being. Lastly, and most practically, these deep dives take an immense amount of energy, time, and effort, even though it may not look like it. Processing hundreds of pages of text messages, processing with professional help, a sloppy corporate ledger, and organizing people's stories for them after they submit court documents is actually an exhaustive process with very little tangible return beyond providing closure for the public, which I love doing, but I don't want to burn out at the same time. So I'll be returning to our usual routine, covering other stories and actually getting back to playing games too. So I truly hope you'll tag along for the journey. Thank you for sticking with me through this investigation series into Ashes of Creation thus far. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Drop a comment below and let me know your final thoughts on this saga. I'll see you all in the next one.